Welcome, everyone. I know we're just waiting now as folks join the webinar. My name is Jill Haney. I'm the Director of Literacy at Saddleback Educational, and we are delighted today to have a special guest with us, Anna Saeli, who has helped us with the creation of our newest series of books that includes interviews, and you'll learn all about that in today's webinar. We would love for you, as you join us, to mention in the chat where you're from and whether school has started. I'm in Colorado, northern Colorado, and school started here last week. So this is going to be the last school year for my son, and that's quite an accomplishment, and I can't believe that 1 year from now I won't have any children in school anymore. But we're excited to kind of see the school year get going, and would love to hear how your school year has started. We are very excited to have the opportunity today to visit with Anna. Anna, how about you? How is school going in your area?
Really well. It's busy, busy. I think a lot of people can relate to the beginning of the school being so busy. I feel like, I don't know if you experienced this in your schools, but there's a lot of shuffling. Like every day there's new students coming and going, lots of shuffling around. So you don't really have everything finalized for a few weeks at least. But it's been really fun. I'm teaching newcomers and like intermediate level students this year, and it's been really exciting so far.
Awesome. Wonderful.
Mhm.
And what's the weather like for you at this point in time?
Well, it's kind of rainy.
Huh.
Yeah, I mean, we get a lot of rain here in Tennessee, which I think is a good thing because we have a lot of green and forest. Um, in Colorado, you don't get very much rain at all, right?
Not really. We'll like with the heat of the summer, we'll get, the afternoon thunderstorms and things like that.
Mhm.
We've been in the 90s, and it looks like next week we'll actually have a dip in temps because we are expecting some rain. So that will be very nice. We
Yeah.
really need the rain in the western part of Colorado, which is having a lot of wildfires right now. So,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Are you excited for fall? Do you like the fall
oh
season?
yes, it's my favorite season.
Yeah. See, I'm sad to see summer go, and my husband's always like, I can't wait until it's freezing cold outside. And I'm like, no.
Again, I want to say welcome to everybody and thank you for joining us with our webinar today. We'd love for you to share in the chat where you're from and whether school has started. And we will get started right on time here in just about another minute. But right now, as folks are kind of joining us, we'd love to hear a little bit about you in the chat. So feel free to type in where you're from and what's going on in terms of school starting.
I'm assuming that most places have started school by now.
Depends. It really is very regional in the US. So there are some that still do not start until after Labor Day. And so they also oftentimes then go later into June when they finish the school year.
Hmm.
Ah, yeah. So there's someone, New Jersey, starting September 2nd. Yes.
Wow. And now I'm curious how late into May you go.
And Hallie's just joining us, starting after Labor Day from Virginia. So obviously, my own idea that it was mostly West Coast that starts after Labor Day is completely wrong because we're seeing a lot of East Coast folks here.
They end in late June in New Jersey. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, Tennessee, we just start very early. We started on the 8th of August.
Wow. Yes, you've already been rolling here. All
Mhm.
right. Well, I see that we are right at our starting time. So I want to officially welcome everyone. We have a great group here today for a conversation about Saddleback's newest series, the Welcome Newcomers Stories. And I am absolutely delighted to have all of you with us today and to be joined by Anna Saeli, who has interviewed her students and whose students' stories have formed the basis for this series. So I wanted to just for a moment introduce myself, and then we'll have Anna also introduce herself. But my name is Jill Haney. I'm the Director of Literacy here at Saddleback, and have had the great joy in my career of being a middle school teacher, of being a national reading consultant, and then an author and editor. You may have seen my book, High-Low Book Comprehension Strategies, that Saddleback sells, as well as our work on many series, of which I've authored several books as well as edited everything from the phonics decodable readers to our teen emergent reader libraries. And today I have the great joy of talking about the newest series that I've worked on, which is our Welcome Newcomers Stories. And this is a very, very special series. Unlike anything I've ever done in my work before, because it is truly the authentic voices of our students. And the students who wrote these stories really told these stories, and that's really the key to them. They told these stories to their teacher, Anna. So, Anna, would you just tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what inspired you to become an English learner teacher?
Yeah. Well, hello everyone. I'm Anna Saeli. Um, so I guess my story kind of begins when I was little. I had a lot of friends who spoke Spanish, and I always kind of felt left out and jealous, and I wanted to learn another language so badly. So when I went to university, I decided to major in Spanish, and because I wanted to learn Spanish and I wanted to study abroad. And so I studied abroad in Peru and studied at a university entirely in Spanish. And I loved it. It taught me so much. And, I learned a new language, a new culture, and what it's like to navigate a new country. And so when I came back, I was like, what do I want to do with my life? And I thought about becoming a teacher and teaching English to people who moved to the United States. Because when I studied abroad in Peru, there was so many people who helped me, and
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't have had such a positive experience without them. And I just felt like I want to do that for people when they come to my country. I want to welcome them, help them learn, make them feel comfortable. And so I went on to get my master's degree in teaching English as a second language. I spent a semester teaching in China, teaching English
Ah,
composition there. And when I came back and I had finished my master's program, I got a job teaching high school ELL here in Tennessee, um, and never looked back. I loved it so much. I have taught all levels of learners. My favorite is newcomers,
mhm.
and because I just love to see their progress. I love to see things click, and I kind of love to be their school mom and just help them navigate a new place. And so I'm excited to tell you kind of how my teaching journey kind of brought me to creating these books.
Awesome, awesome. So let's, without further ado, let's introduce these wonderful books to our participants today. Here you see the 18 covers of the books that we have in this series, and you'll notice right away that each one is titled by the country that the student came from, and it's really that student's story of what it was like coming from that country to the United States. And we are just thrilled to have so many different countries and students represented in this series. We think this is really just a dynamic series, and each book not only has the student's story, but then some background about that country. So, Anna, I would love for you to tell us what inspired you to start this project. What inspired you to begin interviewing students?
Mhm. So when I first became an ELL teacher, this was about 7 years ago when I started teaching high school. My district didn't really have curriculum for us to use at all. I remember when I first started, I was like, okay, like what textbooks do we use? What materials do we use? And they just said, whatever you need, whatever the students need, they'll just teach that. And the creative freedom was nice, but I also was like, oh my gosh, what do I teach them? And so I remember wanting to teach from some sort of text. And so when I looked at, the high school English texts, they were way too complex and difficult for my students. The reading level was way too high, and a lot of times the content was very culturally specific, and it was something that I felt like they wouldn't engage with. So then
Mhm.
when I started to look at materials that were for like elementary or middle school, which was an appropriate reading level, again, I was like, these are kind of babyish, and I want something mature for my high school students to use. So at the same time that this was happening, I had some of my students write narratives. And I had one student who was just kind of sitting there staring at his computer, kind of stumped, couldn't get started. And so a lot of times when that happens, my students are a lot more comfortable with speaking a lot of the time. So I came and sat next to him and I was like, why don't you tell me the story and I'll type it up for you and then we'll go back and edit. And so he proceeded to tell me the story that is actually the story in, yeah, there it is, in the Honduras book. Um, it was the most incredible, raw story about him going with a coyote to cross the border, the Mexican border, with his family when he was very, very young, and how he didn't want to do it. It wasn't really his choice. And he just told me this incredible story of how he ended up in my classroom. And I thought about it for so long after. I was like, this is so profound. And I had never heard a story like that before. It was my first year as an ELL teacher. But as I started to teach more, I realized so many of my students have incredible stories like this. And how cool would it be if we read each other's stories? And that was the classroom material that I use. And so I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make my own stories. I'm going to interview my students. And I decided to interview them because, like I said, a lot of them are more comfortable speaking, and I knew I could maybe pull some stories out of them. So I would just, I chose 18 students from 18 different countries because that's the kids that were in my school. And I interviewed them, I recorded their voices, I transcribed everything, and, kind of cut them into the stories that you see in front of you now. And it was really important to me to keep their language authentic because, these were like advanced level students, and I wanted these to be reading materials for maybe intermediate. So it'd be just a little bit beyond their reading level. Um, and so, yeah, so that's kind of what's in front of you here.
Gotcha. And I know when we talk about these countries and the fact that you've got the 18 different countries, really, what made you choose this particular group of 18 countries? What kind of inspired you to do that?
Yeah. Well, they were students in my school at the time. I was choosing students from my pool that I knew, but it was very, very important to me that I had as much representation as possible. I wanted that every student in my classroom could pick up one of these books and feel represented. So I really wanted to have every continent represented, different language backgrounds, different religious backgrounds. Um, I really, because a lot of times for ELL students, they don't always get to see themselves in stories and in literature. And that was so important to me because I knew if my students were reading something that they connected with, then they would be engaged, they would want to read. And that is kind of the whole goal here is how can we get students to want to read? And so a lot of my students now, when they see a story that's from their country, they're so excited. They want to read about something that they know and that they can be an expert in. So I think, yeah, I was really thinking about representation and can each kid pick up a book and feel like I connect with this character.
That makes sense. Yes. And when we talk about what these interviews, what questions did you ask? What really drove you also to ask those particular questions? And I'm sharing a table of contents because the chapters sort of naturally followed from your questions. So tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah, so with the interviews, I would start by saying, tell me about your country. What was it like to just walk around in your neighborhood? What would I see if I was there? What was school like? It was really interesting to me to see the differences and some similarities in school. And then I asked them to tell me about when their family first started to decide that they would move to the United States, what that journey was like, what their first day in the United States was like, because I think those memories are always so vivid to them. You know,
Yeah.
what did they eat? What was the first day of school like? What was it like learning English? What was hard? What was funny? What was a culture shock? I really wanted to have pretty broad questions so that they would just really tell me as much story as they could. And then I asked them, you know, what are their dreams for the future? Because a lot of these stories are such beautiful examples of resilience.
Yes.
And yeah, so what are their dreams for the future? And then what advice would they give to other students who are in their shoes?
Excellent. Yeah. And I can attest as someone who's read all of these stories that it is absolutely amazing to read their advice to other newcomers. It's so authentic, and it's also just uh, so they have insights that are just amazing. And yeah, I just love these stories so much. So can you tell us a little bit about how you placed the stories that these students told, these individual stories, in the context of the country from where they came?
Yeah, so whenever I would teach with these stories, we would first spend a day kind of learning about that country and the culture there and the historical context.
Mhm.
Because I think as ELO teachers, the longer you do it, the more you learn how important it is to know what's going on in the world around you, and that the students in your classroom are there for a reason. And sometimes it's outside of your control, it's because something happened in their country.
Yeah,
And so, in order to understand the stories, you have to understand the context of where these students come from. And so I love that these books have a lot of information about the country because it really helps you to better understand the story. So the example that we have here is the China story. So this is a story of one of my students who was adopted by an American family. And she was born during the time when China had their one-child policy. So a lot of children, especially girls, would end up in orphanages in China. And that's kind of how her journey came to where she ended up here and was adopted by an American family. And I think it's important to understand this little, you know, this law, this policy had this huge effect
yeah.
on, you know, it's this ripple effect to where she was sitting in my classroom to tell me her story. So I think it's just really important to understand the country that the students come from and how that impacts people's lives.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why, with each of these stories, we have this section in the back of each story that is really highlights the country, the geography, the culture there, some of the customs, the kinds of historical events that may have led to the situation that the student finds themselves in. I think of Ukraine, where obviously that particular story comes from a student who is fleeing as the bombs are falling when the war begins. And so that context of where the student came from and what was happening is such an integral part of what leads to that student's experiences. And I love the fact that we have that pairing in here.
Well,
So
I wanted to say one more thing too.
absolutely.
You know, some of these topics are hard, but you know, I these books are for teens by teens, and I feel like my students are hungry and ready for topics like this, real life things. And so I think it opens up really important conversation that we can create a safe place in our classroom to have these conversations. So yeah, I think it's a really important part of the books for sure.
It is, yes. And I see that Justine asks about difficulty with sensitive issues and what sort of ways that you approached dealing with that. And I think you've just touched on that some with that, there are some very challenging situations that some of these students found themselves in, and but they get to tell the story in their own words. Uh,
Mhm.
and and you're right, just like the Honduras story, sometimes it feels very raw uh, and uh, and very real because that was their experience.
Yeah, and I think with teaching these stories, I have prefaced before of, we're going to read about this thing and we're going to be mature about it and we're going to explore this topic. And I feel like students kind of appreciate when you say, I think that you're ready for this and that we can have this conversation in our classroom. Um, so I think just being sensitive, reading them before and yeah, having that conversation and being honest with your students, like, let's open this up. Let's talk about this.
Mhm. Absolutely. All right. So I want to take a moment now to just share with everybody what this looks like as a series. The box, you can see the beautiful box that is right there behind Anna. And inside that box are 18 different stories, 3 copies of each. And then there are also vocabulary cards because each of these stories features 15 vocabulary words. And those are in a glossary in the book. And then we also feature them on cards with the words and definitions. And then we also have instructional support. And I just saw one of our participants share how important sentence stems are when we're working with students. And that is one of the things that is included in the instructional support guide is lessons that go along with every book and activities, projects, opportunities for students to take what they hear in the stories and then share some of their own experiences. So this is really, we're very excited about this series and what it offers. And Anna, what I'd love to do is just take a closer look with you on what how are you using these books in the classroom? Because I know you started using them before they were even published. So kind of what are some ways that you're doing that?
Well, I always start every lesson with vocabulary, which is why I love that they have that you guys have vocabulary cards, because I always try to choose the most frequent words, the words that are essential for understanding the text, and I teach those first, so that once we get to reading the story, the students are not gonna stop and be taken out of the story because there's a word they don't understand.
Mhm.
Um, and so then I have the students, we read the stories as a large group, and there's just so many activities that you can do with them, truly, because you can do activities to compare and contrast
Yeah.
the stories. You can compare and contrast schools in different countries. You can have students write their own narratives. You can have students make presentations about where they're from. There's tons of comprehension questions and quizzes so that you can assess that students are understanding the stories. I've had students be discussion leaders. So, like, if a student is from Mexico, they're the discussion leader for the Mexico book. Maybe they write discussion questions and they get to help facilitate the conversation. Um, I mean, I could go on forever. There's so many different activities you can do with these books. And I just love how it opens conversation. I have seen students connect with each other over these texts. So lots and lots of ideas.
Fantastic. So let's take a closer look at that instructional support guide. We know that inside that instructional support guide, we do have a lesson for every single book. And that lesson includes some background so that you can put in context again that country, the geography, the region that the student came from, and also some reading strategies. So every single story includes a pre-reading strategy. This is a hands-on strategy. It's something that really helps students to kind of get into the book itself and be prepared to read, but it is also a strategy that can be used with other books. So these are things that you can take not only with this series, but different ideas for introducing students to books throughout your classroom throughout the year. Uh, Another key thing, and I wanted Anna for you to kind of address this, is that every single one has an essential question. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about your thought process behind essential questions with these books?
Yeah. So as all teachers try to do, we try to have these objectives for all of our lessons. Like, what's the goal? What do we want our students to be able to do or know? And for ELL, it's really important to have a language objective and a content objective. So the language objective being, what in English am I hoping that they can communicate? And the content objective is what is the topic or the thing that we're going to learn. And a lot of times I like to turn those objectives into questions because then if my student can answer that question, then I know that they hit my objective. And so that's kind of the rationale for these essential questions. So you can pose them in the beginning of the lesson, and then you can kind of use it as your post test to see, did we hit that objective? Did we learn the thing that we wanted to learn from the beginning? So that each book has an essential question that explores a different content objective topic.
Excellent. And I saw a question in our chat about Lexile levels, and we will definitely get to some of those Lexile levels. I have a slide where we'll talk about levels here just shortly. But I wanted to kind of explore a little bit more about the instructional support guide, where we have vocabulary, not only in both those vocabulary cards, but vocabulary lessons in the instructional support guide and activities. As Anna mentioned, we have comprehension questions, and we really put an emphasis on listening and speaking because obviously, just as the students really told their stories in these interviews, we also know that the more that our students are able to talk with each other, to really communicate with each other about their thought processes, the better. And so I know that mention in the chat earlier about sentence stems, you'll certainly see these kind of sentence stems here in the listening and speaking and different ideas and ways for students to relate. And also to go back to that essential question that Anna was just talking about. And then graphic organizers are a major piece of this instructional support guide, with a graphic organizer for every single book. And these graphic organizers are meant to not only be used with this particular book, but they provide formats for organizing students' thoughts and helping them also with their own writing and preparing to kind of tell their stories. So you'll have a variety of different graphic organizers available. So Anna, I know graphic organizers are a big piece of your work. What do you like about graphic organizers in your classroom?
Yeah. Well, I am a very visual person, and I feel like my students tend to be very visual. And so I love to use graphic organizers because they help you organize all of your thoughts. And a lot of times, the final product that I want my students to produce is something written, like an essay or a paragraph. But it's very intimidating to just write a paragraph or an essay. And so I really love to use graphic organizers as a stepping stone to get to that point of writing something. Um, so it's just a way for them to visually see, these are my ideas, this is how it can be organized. And then later they can take their ideas and put it into, a nice paragraph or an essay or something like that. So it's just a really great way to scaffold and help your students get to that really difficult challenge where they feel like they can do it.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And We talked a little bit about the vocabulary already, but I want to just talk about how it works together in this series with those 15 words that are in the text and highlighted in the text when they first show up in that student's story, and then a glossary in the back with the definitions, the vocabulary cards that have those same words and definitions, and then the instructional support with vocabulary ideas for using the cards, as well as a lesson that is very project based in terms of the vocabulary. So, Anna, you mentioned already about vocabulary, but how important is that for your students, and what is it that you like to do to teach vocabulary?
Mhm. I think vocabulary is just so important. To me, it's like 50% of learning a language, is understanding words, but also being able to use them. So there's a ton of really good vocabulary activities in this book that I have used. I love to, well, first just teach the word, showing them pictures of the word, examples of how it's used in a sentence.
Mhm.
But then each day, my students know like the first 20 minutes of class is always vocabulary, and we do different activities to study it. So maybe one day I will put the definition on the board and they have to tell me the word. Maybe the other day it's the reverse, where the word is on the board and they have to describe the definition in their own words. Another day, maybe they have to use the word in a sentence. I also love to do little activities like where they have to help each other guess the word. I've even watched like late night shows where they have games like
Oh,
on Jimmy Fallon, they have the game Password, where
yeah.
you can only say one word to make your partner guess the word. Like it has to be one word at a time. So there's just so many activities you can use that are really fun to help students learn vocabulary. So then it's fun and they know the words, and that really removes any barriers that they might have to understanding the text later.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that vocabulary is such a key element for our English learners in terms of closing that gap. It's, as opportunities to add the vocabulary and become comfortable using it is just so important to their success. All right, so before we go and wrap up and talk about more about the series, I want to invite those of you who are in our webinar today to, you've been using the chat wonderfully, and I love all the ideas that have been shared. We would love if you have any questions specific to Anna or myself to please add those to the chat, and we're going to address those. I do know that we had a question earlier about the Lexile levels. So these stories, there's 18 stories. They're told in the students' own words, and we really wanted it to be their authentic voice. So you will see quite a large range in terms of the Lexile levels from 300 to 620, because we really wanted these stories to maintain that authentic voice that the student had as they told their stories. So these are a little higher in Lexile than some of other series that Saddleback has done, but still at a very low reading level overall with that 2.0 to 2.9 level. And you can pick and choose. In fact, Anna, you were mentioning to me just a little earlier today which book you are planning to teach first. And could you just share that a little bit about why?
Yeah, of course. So I decided to teach with the Guatemala book first because it is the lowest Lexile level. But also, I really wanted to start with a story of a South American country, Central American country, because that's where most of my students are from. And there's a lot of themes in it that I felt they would connect with. And I feel like these books, so at my school, we do have a curriculum, and I'm just kind of like adding these books in as supplemental readings because they fit really well into so many themes. Like, I feel like any theme that I'm teaching, the theme that we have this month is my life. So, very easy to fit these books into, or friendship, or overcoming challenges. There's so many themes that I can just fit these books right in as supplemental reading. And so my plan is to consider those topics, but also build up with the Lexile level as I go
Makes
along.
sense. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing slides here for just a moment so that Anna and I can just continue to kind of have conversation, and then we'll kind of come back. But as we are talking, again, I want to encourage all of you who have questions to please add your questions to the chat, and we will definitely address those. Anna, I'd like to know what surprised you the most when you started interviewing your students for this series?
I think what surprised me is, some of these students I've had in my classroom for 4 years. Like I've been teaching them every day for 4 years from when they were freshmen to a senior to graduate. And I think I know my students very well. Um, but I learned so much by sitting down and really asking them questions about their lives. Um, I was just so shocked with some of the challenges they've overcome, some of the things that they have been through, and that they're so young and they're so resilient and they still dream. Um, I just found it amazing that they have these stories and they're still trucking along, wanting to do these amazing things with their lives. And it just was very profound to me because I realized when you know someone's story, you can build so much more empathy for them. And that's why I really wanted these stories to be shared because I want people to know all the different reasons why people move to another country and also how important it is to really ask questions of people. Most people are not going to open up. Um, from nowhere. And so I just learned that if I want to really get to know my students, I need to ask them specific questions, and that will help to open up a conversation where we dig a little bit deeper into our experiences. And so I feel like with teaching these books, it is opening up those conversations with the students I have right now of in some ways the stories are vulnerable and they're sharing their vulnerable feelings and thoughts and experiences. And so then my students feel safe to do that as well. And then within our classroom, we kind of have this feeling of trust. And so, yes, we're learning English and academic vocabulary and reading and writing, but we're also creating an environment of empathy and connection and support for each other because they all do have this shared experience. And so it just became so much bigger than I ever imagined, honestly. So, yeah, that was a big, big shock.
Yes. Um, and I know from reading these stories that every story touches my heart and really is impactful in that way. But can you just share what's a story that really touched your heart and why as you did these interviews?
It's hard to choose just one. Um, I think one of the last stories actually that I did an interview for was these three sisters from Afghanistan.
Mhm.
And I really wanted to interview some girls from Afghanistan because knowing that in Afghanistan, not all girls get to go to school, I was very interested to know what that experience was like. Um, and it was just so beautiful how appreciative they were that they got to be in school and the love that they had for their dad, that he was so supportive of them getting an education and that they left some friends behind who wouldn't have that opportunity. um that story really really tugged at my heart so much. And I think it's an important thing for other students to see that education is a privilege that not everybody gets to have, and they were just so grateful for it and so grateful to be a part of this project. So I'm really glad that they were my last interview. It was a really strong one.
Yeah, yeah, that is a book that definitely is one that stays with you, especially. And again, that last chapter of every book where they give their advice to other newcomers, just some very profound uh, thoughts that get shared about, with each of them. And it makes you understand just how wise our students really are. So when you think about these books and this series, you mentioned earlier, that these are by teens, that who are these stories for? Who are you hoping gets access to these stories?
Well, kind of like you were just saying, is the advice that these students give is so wise and so profound. And it's advice that other EL students can understand because it's their shared experience. So for me, I interviewed these students and wrote these stories for my other students to read. They are stories by teens for teens to help us all learn from each other. Um, and for them to learn from someone who has had this experience and knows what it's like, and that they can feel understood, or maybe they even get to feel like an expert for the first time because they get to say, yeah, in my country it is this way, I can explain. Um, so it's just a way for my students to feel like they have a voice and that they get to read something that you know, it connects to them because it is their story.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, and I would love to know one last question I have before we go to move to some of the great questions that I see coming from our participants. Um, how are your students reacting? They're published now. Their stories are published. How are they reacting to that?
Yeah. I think like me, it's surreal. This is a project I started 2 years ago, and I would just kind of ask them, like, can I interview you? Like, I want to write your stories down to teach with. And they all were kind of like, that's weird, but okay. So they sat down for an hour with me and had a conversation, and I think it's very shocking to them that now there's a book about them that's published in print. Um, yeah, I think it still doesn't feel real. And I'm very excited because some of them have not seen their books yet. Some of them have, some of them have not. So I am planning an event at my school where I get to give the students who participated their very own book and say, at the end of every interview, I told them, like, thank you for sharing your story. It's so important. And I'm getting kind of emotional. Um, so I'm just really proud of them that they were vulnerable and that other students are going to get to learn from them.
I agree. I agree. Yes. All right. So I want to now, again, just kind of share a picture of that, the series, the box, and take a moment now to add what kind of questions have come up here. So I see, see. Uh, One question that Darina asked before she had to go, do you have any pushback? Or did you get any pushback from students or teachers or guardians who didn't want to tell their stories because it was too traumatic? But, was that an issue as you did these?
Before I did every story, I made sure that I got permission from families. And I also told them I would change any personal, identifiable information. Um, because, yeah, I didn't want families to have any issues if they shared their stories. So I did have permission. The students knew, and I made sure they understood, like, if this gets published one day, are you comfortable to have this story in print? Um, so no, I haven't had any pushback at all. In fact, all the students were actually really excited to be a part of it. So no, that wasn't ever an issue, and all of the students and their families gave permission to participate.
Yeah, and I do want to mention that while these stories each have a name that says, for example, Guatemala says Maria's story, that name is actually a pseudonym. And can you tell a little bit about how those pseudonyms came to be?
Yeah, well, at first I was like, I'll pick names, but then I thought, no, the students should pick a name that's significant to them. So at the beginning of each interview, I said, I'm going to change your name. Some of them didn't want me to. They wanted their name to be on it, but I was like, everyone has to have their name changed. And so they got to choose a name that was special for them in some way.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, and I know Amber is with us today from Saddleback. And Amber, I think you have been gathering some additional questions that you wanted to ask.
Absolutely. We got a lot of great questions. I'm really enjoying watching the chat and seeing everybody react to these. So thank you so much for everybody who has been posting today. The first question I have here, I wanted to mention from Betsy, who has said, I've had kids who didn't want to describe their journey at all. Was that ever an issue for you?
Um, well, as far for this, I would explain to them what it was before I interviewed them. And so um they they were excited to be a part of it. I wouldn't say that I've had anyone afraid to open up, but if I were using it in my classroom and I was asking them to write a narrative or something like that as an assignment, and they were hesitant to open up about it, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can have students open up. It doesn't necessarily have to be a story about, them traveling, something that's traumatic for them. It lends itself to talking about a lot of things that might feel safer, like talking about school or talking about their neighborhood or um, I think there's many ways for students to open up about topics that they feel comfortable with. It's not like you have to say, what's the most traumatic thing that happened? Let's write about it. You can choose topics that make them feel safe and comfortable to talk about.
Yeah, excellent. I've got another comment here. I know I have Haitian students, and I wonder if they will feel left out if there are so many other cultures but not theirs.
Mhm. I would say for that, yeah, I mean, it's not possible to have every single country represented. I wish I would do it if I could. But I will say that I think each book has some theme, some topic, something that students can relate to. And a lot of these books, even though they're different countries, they may share similar cultural experiences. Like I would say for the Haitians, the Jamaican student, they may relate to being from an island and some of the activities that he talks about that they do. Um, I think students will be surprised that they have similarities and differences with every single character from every single book. And that might surprise them. And that is also a really special thing that maybe a student from Iraq connects with the student or the book from Micronesia. Um, and that's kind of the beauty of it is for us to celebrate our differences, but also see that at the end of the day, we have a lot more similarities than we realize. So I would hope that it kind of opens that kind of discussion.
I also want to just mention on this that I really see these as almost a springboard to helping students share their own stories as well. And that's really a dream that I have, that this will inspire the students who read these stories to want to share theirs. And so I would say in the classroom that has those Haitian students, that's a perfect opportunity for them to add their own story to the set in their classroom and pull that together using the model of these stories. I've had some great collaborations on projects in the past where students read a model and then eventually make their own, and librarians who will publish the students' stories in the school library as well. So there's a lot of, I think, extensions that can happen with this. Even if a particular country is not represented, then that can become the mission of that student or that group of students to add their own story.
Yeah, I can see my students doing that for sure, saying, there's not Brazil. Well, then you write it. I think they would take on the challenge.
Mhm.
I think we have time for a couple more. I did have questions about the instructional support guide, referencing that we showed some graphic organizers, but are there also peer-to-peer activities?
Yes. So one of the things in that instructional support guide is really project and listening and speaking interaction kind of based. So there are lots of opportunities to share and to do partner activities, small groups, as well as whole class discussions. those are all in there. And I should say, this is very much like many, our Saddleback teacher resources always are. There is always more there than you would probably ever do. So you can really pick and choose from the ideas and the thoughts about what you want to do with your students from there. But it is definitely a big emphasis on peer-to-peer as well as project-based small group kinds of activities in there. And the graphic organizers can be done certainly as a partner activity or as an individual or a small group activity. There is that flexibility as well.
Excellent. And I think the last question I have here is, can you address how these can be implemented in the classroom?
So Anna, I guess you've shared a little bit about what you're doing. I wanted to just say, again, there's a lot of flexibility with how to use these, from a classroom library, where the students can pick and choose, to doing it in small groups. And one of the things that I think is probably because the box itself comes with 3 copies of each book, is that it really is uh, well situated to doing it as a small group of 3, where they all have a copy of the book in front of them, and they can follow, learn the vocabulary, do the pre-reading lesson that is provided in the instructional support, read together. And I certainly, one of the things the instructional support guide suggests, and I, as a reading trainer, would tell you is really important, is to give opportunities for both partner and group support, whether it be choral or echo reading, so that there is that opportunity to have stronger readers supporting readers that may need some additional scaffolding and modeling. And so that is all kind of within that instructional support guide, suggestions for that, so that you can do what works best for your students. Anna, what other things might you want to add to how to implement in the classroom?
I mean, similar to what you said, I think there's so much flexibility. I know that what I want to do is, start with the lowest Lexile level. I am very big on teaching genre. And so I think these stories give a lot of content to write about.
Mhm.
So I, would love to have them compare and contrast countries, cultures, holidays, school. Um, I would love for them to write some sort of argumentative essay that's kind of connected to the essential question. Have them use direct quotes from the books to help them make an argument. Do summaries. Um, so I think for me, I'm going to use them as materials for facilitating writing. But I also really do hope that I'll have my students write their own narratives. I heard a teacher say that it would be really cool to have them also design a book cover of their own.
Mhm.
I love this idea too. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's unlimited ways to be creative with it. And yeah, I'm just excited to get started with it and to see how the students react to them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I know that there are questions that came in the chat that we did not get a chance to address during the webinar today, but I promise you that Saddleback will follow up with you individually in terms of answering questions. And I just wanted to also say that you are welcome to reach out to us at any point. And Saddleback, of course, has its website where you can see this project, this series a little closer. You can download some electronic samples, and you can also visit with us on social media, from Instagram to X. We have accounts, and we love to share ideas. And Anna, would you like to share how folks can reach you?
Yeah, so feel free to email me with questions or just how it's going. I'm so curious to see how other teachers use this curriculum. And then I also have an Instagram page where um, I do cute little videos of my students and interview them and ask them silly questions, but also where I talk about the books. And I plan to also document how I use them in my classroom. So if you want to follow along with me, please follow me on Instagram.
Sounds wonderful. Well, Anna, I just want to thank you for your time this afternoon. I want to thank our audience members for joining us. It's been wonderful to have everybody together today for this webinar, and I can't wait to hear the stories of how these books are being implemented in the classroom. So thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful afternoon and a great back to school.